I'm Jamie, and welcome back to my channel, Jamie Sage Knits, where we talk about all things knitting, yarn, knitwear, fiber arts, and today I'll be sharing 15 plus colorwork patterns for Strega Nona fall, just kind of leaning into that meme. I love the cozy and nostalgic vibe of this, and so you'll notice a lot of the patterns I'll talk about today could kind of lean into that dynamic or into that vibe, especially depending on your color choices. If you really reach for like earthy hues, jewel tones, I think they could be really beautiful. But if you'd prefer a different vibe for your project, of course, you could also choose different colors that fit with your personal style and taste. I also wanted to mention I'm filming this a few days after the US election, so it's been kind of a hard week. I know it's been a hard week for a lot of people, and for me personally, I really like to reach for stranded colorwork patterns as a fun way to stay engaged and to kind of find a pattern intriguing without being too difficult. And so I've tried to include a variety of like difficulty levels in this video, but if anyone out there is like me and kind of shares that opinion, hopefully these projects or one of these projects could be a fun one to turn to just for some entertainment, relaxation, kind of a way to like get your mind off of things. I know a lot of us use knitting for that purpose, just to kind of help us deal with like the stressors of life. So I hope you find at least one pattern that you feel inspired by. Before I dive in, I also want to mention the sweater I'm wearing today. This is actually in Tarja, so pretty different. I think basically all of the projects I'll be talking about today are stranded colorwork, or actually I think a couple are two-color brioche as well. But I did complete this in Tarja sweater, which was kind of a scrap yarn project, like a stash buster. So you'll see I chose a lot of mostly like bulky weight yarns, and I based this off of the pattern which is called the Jelly Bean sweater. I forget the designer, but I'll include it. And I did adapt the color charts a lot because I included more colors than in the original pattern. And I just wanted to use up as much of these yarns as possible, and it worked out super well, so I'm really happy with it. You can see it's like a really fun, slightly oversized pattern. I think if I made it again, I would probably add some decreases in the sleeves just because they're like pretty big down here. But overall, I think it was a really fun project. I would definitely recommend. It's knit, I think flat and then seamed together. So it's like two body pieces, and then the sleeves are knit flat as well and then seamed up and then added on here. And then you pick up stitches to add a little collar and these little cuffs. So yeah, I really enjoyed this project, and I thought it would be fun to wear a colorwork sweater for my colorwork video. I do have some stranded colorwork sweaters, but I just thought this one would be fun to wear. It's really colorful, and I enjoy just kind of throwing it on. It's really cozy and soft as well because I think it's all single ply, like bulky weight yarns, which is really fun. Anyway, diving into the video, the first pattern that I want to talk about is the Bibi Sweater by Spectacle Shriek. If you've watched my recent podcast, you know I'm really excited about working on this sweater, and it is kind of the main project I've been working on right now. I'll just take any opportunity to hype it up, and I'll provide a more detailed update in my upcoming podcast about my own project, my brain is not working, my own progress on it. And I'll just give a little bit of context now on some specs of the project. So it calls for a fingering weight and lace weight held together, like a wool and a mohair. You could also use a single sport weight yarn. It's knit on 3.5 millimeter needles, so pretty small, but I feel like it knits up relatively quickly because it is just stranded colorwork. It only ever uses 2 colors per row, and it's knit bottom up. One thing that I didn't realize before buying the pattern is that it is steeked, which I guess makes sense because it's a drop shoulder. With colorwork, you want to avoid how much you have to knit flat, so the whole body is knit bottom up in like a cylinder, and then there is a little bit of flat knitting for the neck shaping, and then you go back and you've added like these steeking panels on the sides where you'll add the sleeves in, so then you go reinforce those. I did machine sewing for the steek reinforcements or like lifelines, but you could also hand sew or crochet if you don't have access to a sewing machine. And you cut those and then pick up the stitches for the sleeves. So honestly, if I had known that before buying the pattern, I might have gotten too intimidated and not purchased it. But after my experience, I would recommend forging ahead if, especially if you have access to a sewing machine. But even if not, like for certain projects, you might have to do steeking eventually. I feel like I was putting it off, but I'm really glad that now I've like done it. Now I'm feeling much less intimidated by it. And after my experience with it, it was scary for sure. But nothing went wrong. Like, it went totally fine. The only thing I would say is if you are doing this project, they recommend like a 3-stitch steek bridge. I would probably increase it to 5 stitches just to have a little bit more wiggle room for when you cut. But that's the only thing. I feel like steeking isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, which I often experience with new knitting skills. So what else is there to say about this project? I mean, the color work looks so intricate and amazing. I think it's really cool that it only ever uses 2 colors per row, but it all comes together to form a really beautiful motif. And in terms of sizing, it has, I would say, like decent size inclusivity. The finished circumference at the bust ranges from 40.5 to 59 inches. And they don't specify a recommended ease. I chose a size medium, which I think for me will have 14 inches of positive ease, which now that I'm saying it seems like a lot, but it'll be like a pretty loose, baggy, oversized fit, which seems fun. And of course you could choose a size that has slightly less positive ease if that's what you're interested in. It looks like fair number of the projects on Ravelry are closer to like neutral ease. But some I think are more positive ease as well. Another thing to keep in mind is often with color work, people's tension gets pretty tight. And so even if you intend for it to have more positive ease, it might come in a little bit. So that's just something to keep in mind. But obviously, because this project has so many colors, there's a lot you could do with the color selection. And depending on your vibe and your style, you could really personalize it. So this is just one that I'm feeling so excited about. It's been really, really fun and engaging to knit. So I would definitely recommend it if you are familiar with steeking or if you're up to the challenge of trying out steeking. The second one I want to mention is similar in some ways, but also kind of distinct. So it's I don't know how to pronounce it, the Pohjola Pullover by Sari Nordland. The similarities are that it's also fingering weight. It's knit with 4mm needles, so pretty close. It's also like a relatively fine gauge. And it is, now the difference is it's knit top down with a circular yoke. To me, that's like a much more pleasant construction to work on. I prefer working on things top down. Circular yoke, I think is fine and pretty standard for a colorwork yoke. And in terms of the sizing, this project recommends 2 to 4 inches of positive ease, and the finished bust measurements range from 33.5 to 60.5 inches. So I think that's pretty size inclusive. And I just thought this was such a beautiful, classic, kind of like cozy pattern to work on. I think it's really fun that it has, of course, this like pretty intricate color work on the yoke, but then there's also some plain stockinette portions to work on. And so I think it would be a fun project in that regard. I like having at least one project I'm working on that's more invested, and then another project that's more mindless that I could like knit while I'm chatting with friends or on the subway or things like that. So it's kind of cool that this project is like half and half. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this one. I definitely have it in my queue. Hopefully I will knit it at some point, and definitely let me know if you decide to try this one out. The next one I want to try is a little bit of a different vibe. So this is the Tarot Card Sweater by Tamara Jordan. This is a sport weight knit on 3.75mm needles, so we're in the same family there of gauge. It comes with 6 different colorwork charts that you can choose from, and you can do obviously just one chart on the front, you can do back and front, and you can also make a vest or slip over version instead of the full sweater. The colorwork is apparently worked flat using ladder back jacquard, which I've actually never done, but my philosophy with knitting is if there's something unfamiliar, just Google it, look up the YouTube videos, and I think most times you can find like a pretty good explanation. And there's no way to learn a new skill unless you try. So this one is definitely also on the queue for me. I think it's really cute, and it has pretty inclusive sizing as well. It recommends 6 inches of positive ease, and the bust measurements range from 36 to 68 inches for the completed project. So that one I think is really fun, and it's a little bit different. There's not like as much color work going on. It's just like the single motif on the front. So that's pretty cool. The next one is called the Ruled by Neptune Sweater by Nora Sweater. It is a DK plus lace weight together. I'm sure you could also not include the lace mohair if you prefer. It's knit on 4.5 millimeter needles with a circular yoke, and the sizing of this one also recommends about 4 to 6 inches of positive ease, and it includes finished bust measurements of 35 to 53 inches. This sweater reminds me a little bit of the halibut sweater, which I feel like has been so popular recently. So I feel like it'd be kind of fun to do something that's a little bit similar, but also different, like not exactly the same. And I just think this pattern is so beautiful. I do love the colorwork motif around the yoke. And I also noticed on this designer's Instagram that she has a couple of upcoming patterns that are a bit similar and also seem really cool. So those ones are called A Conspiracy of Ravens and Eclipse of Moths. So they also have like the colorwork yoke, and those ones won't be out for a couple of months. So that's why I wanted to mention the Ruled by Neptune sweater, but I also wanted to let you know that if you're intrigued, you could maybe check out those other patterns and see if you want to wait a little bit for those ones to come out. Or if you enjoy this sweater, you could look forward to also knitting some of this designer's other patterns. But yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about this one. I just think the construction is like very classic in terms of that colorwork yoke, and the motif itself is really cute and fun, and kind of like quaint, I guess, fitting in with the theme of the video. So the next pattern I want to talk about is pretty different. It's like more of a graphic pattern, I guess. This is the Piet Sweater by Joanna Garish, and this one, again, like the vibe could be so different depending on what colors you choose. It could be a lot more preppy, but I also think it could lean more into like a plaid or like tartan vibe if you're choosing more like, you know, forest green, rust colors, like autumnal leaf colors. I think it could be really beautiful. And just to give a little bit more detail on the specs of this project, it calls for 2 fingering weight yarns held together, a fingering weight merino and a brushed alpaca. I imagine you could also use a single DK weight yarn, and this would be on 4.5 millimeter needles. It's knit top down with drop sleeves. I noticed that there's short row shaping on the sleeves, which is interesting. I feel like when a designer does that, it usually demonstrates that they're paying a lot of attention to the fit, and they're taking like a nuanced approach. So I think that's nice. And then you'll notice in this sweater, it is basically knit with horizontal stripes. And then there's these vertical stripes that I think add a lot of visual interest and make it more of that like plaid vibe. Those are actually added afterwards by crocheting on those vertical stripes. So if you don't know how to crochet, then maybe this is not the perfect project for you. But I also think this is one where like you're just crocheting slip stitches up, I assume, in a straight line. So I don't think it requires that much crochet skill. You just kind of have to know how to use a crochet hook and make a slip stitch, which is pretty easy to look up if you aren't familiar. And then this one, I would say pretty similar to the sizing of the others, 6 to 8 inches of positive ease. It ranges from finished bust measurement of 41 to 55.5 inches. So that's like a decent range, maybe not as size inclusive as some of the others, but I thought it was a really fun pattern and just one that I wanted to include a note. And I do think that aspect of like the crocheted vertical stitches is quite unique. I think it adds a cool element. It adds a little bit of texture as well to do the crochet. So that's something I've never done before, but it seems like an interesting element to add. The next couple of patterns that I want to talk about kind of go together. Basically what happened is I found the first one, I thought it was cool, but it's not very size inclusive, as you'll see, so I kind of looked for a similar one, found one. I love both of them, but I feel like they're quite similar, but have some key differences in the actual like colorwork motif. So to dive in, the first one is the Ingrid Sweater by Louise Fredrickson. This is a bulky weight 2-color brioche sweater that is worked mostly on 7mm needles, so I feel like that would work up really quickly. However, it only has small, medium, and large sizes. So the sizing there, of course, is pretty limited. I do love this like leaf motif. I think it's really cool. And I also will say, I think a lot of people, I've probably talked about this before, a lot of people are intimidated by brioche or 2-color brioche. I don't think it's actually that difficult or complicated to do. The challenge that I found that I've also heard people talk about is that it's much harder to understand the construction of the stitches And the implication of that is if you mess up or if you drop a stitch, it's harder to resolve it compared to like stockinette or other stitches. But to me, it's worth it as long as you are thoughtful, don't rush, just, do your best to avoid making mistakes. Then in my mind, that resolves the issue. I know that's not like the most responsible. I'm sure if I looked it up, there probably are resources online about learning how to fix brioche mistakes. So that's also, an aspect that could make this project more accessible. This project, because it is bulky weight and I think would knit up pretty quickly, hopefully wouldn't be too much of an issue. So I think this could be a good one to like learn a new skill if necessary. And the second project that I wanted to talk about here, you'll see is kind of similar. It's called the Branch Jumper by Lean or Lene Ricks. And this one's also bulky weight, also knit on 7mm needles, also 2-color brioche. This one has a lot more detail and size inclusivity around sizing. So it has 4 inches of positive ease, or it calls for 4 inches of positive ease, and it includes finished bust circumferences of 37 to 53 inches. So still not the widest range ever, but a lot better. And one of the samples I noticed uses this like ombre yarn, which looks really beautiful. And then they also provide like what it would look like with just 2 single color yarns. I think both options look amazing. And I do really like both of these patterns. I think if I were to do one, I probably would do the Ingrid Sweater, just because I like the motif slightly more. But I think both of them are really cool. And of course, you can see if you like either or both, or maybe you don't like either of them, that's okay. But yeah, I just thought these were really cool ones to include, and it's a different type of color work. Rather than stranded, it's like the 2-color brioche, which I think looks really beautiful. The next project I want to talk about is the Aase Sweater by Haneraman. This one is fingering plus lace weight held together, or I imagine you could use a DK weight yarn. It's knit on 3 and 3.5mm needles. It looks like it has a drop shoulder. There's honestly not much information on the construction, but I would guess that it has a drop shoulder construction, and it looks like there are 4 sizes that range a pretty, or that span a pretty wide range. So the chest circumference that it fits, so not the completed measurements, but your measurements would be 31.5 to 54 inches. So a pretty decent range. So, I mean, this one, I think the colorwork motif is quite repetitive, which some people might enjoy, because you can really get into it and it becomes a little bit more mindless. Of course, some people might prefer a colorwork motif that has a bit more variation. So, it really just depends on what suits you the most. The next pattern I'm thinking about is the off-grid sweater. This is another one that's pretty intriguing to me, and the color work is like a different type. It's not stranded, it is more of like a ribbing color work. It's not 2-color brioche, but it's kind of a similar vibe. And I don't even know if I said the name. This is the Off-Grid Sweater by Rose Knitwear. A little bit of detail about the construction. It is knit in an Aran or worsted weight yarn on 4mm needles. It's knit in the round from the bottom up, and it uses all over slip rib stitches to create that texture. And it includes 4 sizes to fit a chest circumference of 32 to 46 inches. So it's not the most size inclusive, but it does have an okay span. I just thought this one is really cool. Like in general, Rose Knitwear has a reputation for making pretty interesting patterns, and I've never made one by them before, but I do have a few saved in my favorites or in my queue. This one is really cool, I think, and again, depending on the color selection, it could really change the vibe. You could do something, I'm imagining, with like primary colors that could be a lot more bold and vibrant, or of course you could do something, honestly the sample that they have is a bit toned down and autumnal, and you could even lean into that vibe further. So this one seems pretty fun and an interesting texture. I don't think I've ever done slip rib stitches before, but from what I read in the description, it seems like it's kind of just a combination of like knit, purl, and slip stitches that creates this cool texture. Next, I want to talk about a sweater that I have trouble pronouncing. It's called Sumuneule. I'll put the name, of course, over here. And the designer is named Villa Hulu. This is a bulky weight knit on 6mm needles. This one I feel like is a very classic, kind of like ombre. It's a little bit like snow, like reminiscent of snow in a sense somehow. I guess like where it gets down here. I don't know. But this one I think is really cozy. I like that it's a bulky weight and it's up a little bit faster. This one's worked in the round, bottom up. And in terms of the sizing, it includes a finish bust circumference of 36 to 51 inches. So not a super wide range, but it's like okay. And I wanted to include this pattern because I do feel like there's something just very classic and cozy about it. I feel like this could be a fun gift knit for someone that you're close to. Even a bulky weight sweater is kind of a lot of effort for a gift, but I do think this one is just really cute and cozy, and I really enjoy it. And I wanted to include it here. The next one that I want to talk about is the Nora Sweater by Camilla Grady. So this one is Aran weight. It includes a few needle sizes for different portions. It has 4, 4.5, and 5.5mm needles. I would imagine the 4 is probably for the ribbing, and then maybe the 4.5 is for the body, maybe the 5.5 is for the color work, because the gauge can tend to be tighter for that. But it actually doesn't specify. That's just my guess. It specifies the construction is a top-down raglan, which I love. It has short rows in the yoke and also at the bottom of the body. So I imagine that would make it like flare out a little bit or make the back a little bit like longer than the front. So I think that's a cool construction detail. And they do specify for sizing. They recommend a positive ease of 5 to 6 inches. And the finished sizes fit a chest circumference. So this is not the size of the garment, but fits a chest circumference of 27.5 to 49 inches. So kind of a decent range. I feel like it could go a little higher at the top end, but it is a kind of a wide span there. And again, I just thought this was a really classic pattern. I love the colorwork motif of this like Nordic star. And this one is unique because we have a fair number of like colorwork yokes and different stuff going on, but this one is like the colorwork chest and sleeves. So I think this one would be fun. I could see myself knitting it someday. And I do like the one of the samples they have where it's like a white background and just like a color here. I feel like white and navy could be really pretty. I could also imagine like a forest green background with like white Nordic star. That would be pretty. There's a lot of different things you could do with this one. And that is the last sweater I wanted to talk about. So now I want to get into a few accessories, which are more, they're quicker to work up, and I feel like some of these could be good gift knits as well. I might make a separate video about gift knit ideas, but I might just intersperse them into my existing videos. So the first thing I want to talk about here is actually a set of patterns. It's by the designer Sisno Designs, who I discovered recently on Ravelry, and they have a set of what they call Selbu Mittens, which I looked up, and I think it's a city in Denmark, so I imagine it's maybe like a style of mittens that they've made several variations of. And they have, I think, like at least 5 different colorwork charts and patterns for this. Some of the names are like swirl, big star, star dot, pine tree, star. And I just think these are so beautiful. I love the colorwork motifs. They don't specify a yarn weight or a gauge, but they do recommend 3.5mm needles, so I imagine you could use like a sport or DK weight. And they say that's for a size medium, and then you can size up or down by using a different yarn weight and a different needle size, which is interesting. But then I feel like, I don't know, maybe the pattern itself has more detail on how to do that. The Ravelry description did not. So that might be something I'll look into more. But I feel like for me, I didn't mind too much because I assume I could wear medium size mittens. But if you wanted to make, for someone with like smaller or larger hands, that would be something to look into. And it doesn't seem like they have like children's sizes. I think the designer did have a separate pattern for children's sizes actually. So that's cool. And just something that I noticed is that the colorwork is so intricate, and they have different motifs for the cuff, the back of the hand, the front of the hand, the thumbs even. So I just thought that was so beautiful, and it seems like a really classic like Scandinavian or Norwegian mitten style. So I could see myself definitely purchasing at least one of these patterns. I don't even know which one yet. I wanted to choose one to include in the video, but they're too beautiful. So I just wanted to reference all of them and see if you enjoy any of them. You can take your pick. I also wanted to talk about the Spotty neck warmer by Ann Wenzel. So I feel like a neck warmer is really fun. I guess it's similar to a cowl, right? But maybe a little tighter. I feel like this is a very practical piece, and it could kind of just like tuck into your coat and really protect from that wind and that like cold air seeping in when it gets chilly. But it's probably a lot quicker than a scarf, and maybe you could knit it in the round. It kind of looks in the sample like there's a seam, but I think that would be really convenient if you could just knit it up in the round, like super easy and simple. And just to give a little bit of detail on the specs of this project, it recommends a DK plus lace weight yarn held together, knit on 4.5 millimeter needles. And it has 5 different sizes that are recommended for 4 to 6-year-old children, 8 to 10-year-old children, and then 3 different adult sizes. So I think this one would be a really fun one and probably a quick one. Also a really practical project to knit up. And again, a lot of different things that you could do with the color choices here. And then lastly, I have a few socks that I want to talk about. It's kind of ironic. I don't like knitting socks, but I love looking at sock patterns, and I like to think that I might knit them someday. If I'm being realistic, I don't think I will knit very many socks in my lifetime. It's just not something I really enjoy, but I know a lot of people do enjoy it, especially as like a smaller project to intersperse with larger projects. And I found a few that I think are really, really fun. So the first one I want to talk about is, I feel like, very festive. It's called the Cup of Hot Cocoa Socks by Stone Knits. And I think Stone Knits is like a pretty popular and well-known sock designer. I'm sure they have a lot of other patterns that are really cute as well, but this one stood out to me as just like this cozy, nostalgic fall pattern. It calls for fingering weight yarn on 2.5 millimeter needles, and it includes 3 sizes to fit a foot circumference of 8, 9, or 10.5 inches. I also really liked the Magic Mushroom socks. I think I came across these on Instagram from the designer Dea Vectorink. And this pattern is not available on Ravelry. It's available specifically from the brand Prue Yarns, which stands for Punk Rock Unicorn. So I'm sure they have some really cute yarns that you could work with on this project. I'll put the link below. And this one also calls for fingering weight, knit on 2 to 2.25 millimeter needles, and it also has 3 sizes, but these ones fit a range of 8 to 9.5 inches. Because I don't knit socks very much, I don't know what is like the normal foot size, but based on these, I'm imagining like this range of 8 to 9.5 hopefully fits a fair number of people. And then the pattern description does say, same as like the mittens I was talking about, you can adjust the gauge and make the pattern smaller or larger by using a different size of yarn and needles. But again, I'm not sure if the pattern has specific instructions on that or if that's something you would have to just kind of like wing it. But yeah, I think these are so fun. I love the colorwork motif. Again, with the colors, you could make it like more cozy or more psychedelic. I just think this is such a fun pattern, and I could see myself being tempted towards it someday. And then the last one I want to talk about here is the Hedgie Socks by the Petite Knitter. I just think these are so cute and precious. This designer also has a bunch of really cute sock patterns. But this is the one I chose to highlight just because I think it's really cute and so precious. And this also calls for fingering weight yarn, 2.25 millimeter needles, and it has a much broader range of sizing, probably like children's sizes as well, because it ranges from 4.5 to 12.5 inches. So that's much more size inclusive, and maybe her other patterns also have that size inclusivity for socks, and that I think would make it as well like a great gift option. You could give it even like matching ones or the same pattern but different colors or things like that to like different people in a family. I think that'd be really cute. But yeah, hopefully you get either some personal inspiration, some gift knit inspiration, and just get some enjoyment out of this video. So I think I'll wrap it up there. Obviously, we talked about a lot of different colorwork options. Please let me know if any of these caught your fancy, and I will hopefully see you soon for my next podcast. Bye.